Sweetheart, put the phone down. Sit up. Because what Remy Ma did last night at exactly 12 o'clock in the morning was not a live, it was not a rant, it was not one of those little emotional Instagram meltdowns we've been trained to laugh at. No, baby. What Remy Ma did last night was a public execution, and Claressa Shields' entire public image was the body on the floor when the smoke cleared. There was no warning. There was no cute countdown. There was no soft R&B playing in the background while Remy Ma sipped a little something and eased us in. Remy Ma pressed that button, stared into that camera, and lit a match to 2 full years of lies the world had been swallowing whole. And by sunrise, honey, Claressa Shields' name was trending for reasons a champion never wants to trend. Papoose was sitting in a parked car looking like he had aged 10 years overnight, and half the internet was refreshing their timeline like their rent depended on it. Because Remy Ma dropped a name. One name. And once that name touched the air, the whole story you thought you knew about Remy Ma, about Papoose, about Claressa Shields, about who was really the villain and who was really the victim, it all flipped. It flipped upside down and it stayed there. Welcome back, sugar. You know exactly where you are. You are in the only kitchen on the internet where the pot is boiling 24 hours a day and nobody, and I do mean nobody, is allowed to add water to what we're serving. Everything you are about to hear is stitched together from public statements, public live streams, publicly circulated messages, and the words that came out of these grown people's own mouths on their own platforms. I did not put a single word in Remy Ma's throat. I did not put a single tear in Papoose's eye. I did not tell Claressa Shields to fight in the ring and then fight another kind of fight online. They did all of this themselves. My job, baby, is just to line it up so you can finally see the whole picture. Now scoot in close, because we're about to walk through this thing beat by beat, and by the end you're going to understand why Remy Ma didn't have to raise her voice one single time to bury an entire narrative. Let's rewind for the folks in the back who just tuned in. 2 decades. That's how long Remy Ma and Papoose stood next to each other. 2 decades of prison letters, of jailhouse visits, of reality television cameras, of red carpets, of a family they built brick by brick while the industry watched and waited for them to fall apart. And they did not fall apart. Not for a very long time. Then came the end of 2024, and Remy Ma did something Remy Ma had never done in public before. Remy Ma pulled out receipts. Screenshots. Timestamps. Names. And the name that kept surfacing was Claressa Shields, undisputed champion boxer out of Flint, Michigan, a woman who had built her entire brand on being the hardest working, most disciplined, most disrespected great in her sport. Suddenly Claressa Shields wasn't just a boxer anymore, she was the woman calling Papoose her man in interview after interview, planning babies in captions, dropping little heart emojis under photographs, and pushing what looked to the whole world like a brand new love story with the ink still wet on somebody else's marriage certificate. And the internet, being the internet, picked a side fast. Claressa Shields was framed as the shiny new chapter. Remy Ma was framed as the bitter ex who could not let go. That was the script we were handed. That was the story that got repeated on every blog, every podcast, every group chat. But if you were paying close attention, if you were sitting where I sit and listening the way I listen, you could feel that something inside that story didn't add up. Something was off about the timing. Something was off about the promotion cycle. Something was off about how Claressa Shields' name kept walking into every Remy Ma conversation uninvited. And in my last video, I told you plain, I told you clear, this whole thing has the fingerprints of a plan all over it. I said somebody was being played. I didn't know all the details yet. But I knew the shape of a setup when I saw one. Hold on to that, because Remy Ma just confirmed every syllable. Because last night, at the stroke of midnight, Remy Ma sat down in front of her camera and she did not do a performance. That's the part one need you to catch. There was no shouting. There was no swearing. There was no waving of arms. Remy Ma sat there like a woman who had already grieved this in private and had come online for one purpose only, to correct the public record. And the first thing Remy Ma said, before the screenshots, before the audio, before the name, was a sentence that should have made everybody's stomach drop. Remy Ma said, "Let's be clear, I am not running on feelings." Now, baby, when a grown woman tells you she is not running on feelings, and then keeps talking calmly for the next several minutes with the receipts already open on her lap, believe her. Because a heated woman screams. A heated woman weeps and deletes the whole video by sunrise. Remy Ma sat there ice cold and started peeling the operation apart layer by layer, and the first layer she peeled was the Publicist. Yes, honey, the Publicist. Remy Ma looked into the camera and pointed out that every single time a certain someone had a project to promote, a fight to sell, a brand deal to announce, Remy Ma's name would somehow, some way, end up in the interview. Not by accident. Not by ambush. Remy Ma explained, in the calmest voice you have ever heard on a live stream, that the very same rep pushing those stories to the outlets is the very same rep who briefs the reporters before they walk in the door. And that rep knows exactly how to say the words, "Please do not raise her name today, please do not steer the conversation there, that is not on the table." Remy Ma said if you truly did not care, you would tell them to keep my name out your mouth. Remy Ma said she had done it herself, plenty of times, whenever she wanted a subject shut down. So the fact that Remy Ma's name kept surfacing in every promo cycle, in every headline, in every soundbite tied to a certain someone's rollout, that wasn't a coincidence. That was a marketing strategy. That was her name being used as advertising for somebody else's career. And she laid that machinery out on the table with the emotional temperature of a woman reading a grocery list. Do you hear what I'm telling you, baby? That was not anger. That was surgery. She opened up the whole publicity engine, showed you the gears, showed you the fuel, and calmly said, "This is how the story you've been fed was manufactured." And once you see that, you cannot unsee it. Every headline you read for the last year, every clip that popped up on your feed, every whisper about how Papoose and Claressa Shields were just so in love, all of it starts to look less like a fairy tale and more like a rollout. A campaign. A product launch with a real woman's marriage as the sacrificial promotional material. And she didn't even sound mad about it. She sounded like a woman who had figured it out a long time ago and was finally ready to name it in daylight. And then, sweetheart, and then she dropped the sentence that broke the internet in half. Because up until that point, we were still in the world of publicity and strategy and interview manipulation. Big stuff, yes. Life-changing stuff, absolutely. But not the kind of thing that makes your jaw hit the floor. What she said next did exactly that. She looked into that camera and claimed that Claressa Shields, the so-called loyal one, the woman who had spent months telling anyone who would listen that she had finally found her forever, had quietly been entertaining a whole other gentleman behind closed doors. And not just any random guy. Somebody who moves inside Papoose's own inner circle. A man close enough that if this is true, the betrayal isn't just to Papoose, the betrayal is to the entire idea Claressa Shields had been selling the public about who Claressa Shields is. Let that sit down in your chest for a full second. The woman who painted herself as the ride or die, the woman who told the world she had won the man fair and square, was allegedly holding a whole other man on standby in the shadows the whole entire time. And the very second, that detail hit the airwaves, something extraordinary happened online. Every account that had been in Claressa Shields' corner defending her tooth and nail suddenly went quiet. Not a peep. Not a witty comeback. Not a hair flip emoji. Just silence. Because the whole sympathy story, the whole poor Claressa Shields angle, only works if Claressa Shields is the innocent party. And once the innocent party starts looking like a player, the story doesn't just crack, honey, the story crumbles. The sympathy evaporates in real time. And she did all of that with a single sentence delivered in a normal speaking voice. Now, baby, a claim without proof is just noise, and Remy Ma knew that better than anyone. Because remember, this is a woman who has been in this game long enough to understand that if you come at somebody's throat online, you better come with paperwork. And that's exactly what she did. She pulled up screenshots. She pulled up messages. And then she played a short audio clip. Just a few seconds. Nothing dramatic. The voice on that clip sounded relaxed. Confident. Almost casual. Like a person who had spoken these particular words 100 times before and had never once imagined they'd be broadcast to the world. She paused it. She looked directly into that camera. And she said, "This isn't about drama. This is about respect and honesty." And you could feel the entire live shift right underneath your fingers. The comments stopped being funny. The gifs stopped rolling in. The laughing emojis dried up. What had been feeding the room 5 minutes ago as pure entertainment suddenly turned into something else. Something heavier. Because paperwork doesn't debate with you, honey. Paperwork doesn't get defensive. Paperwork doesn't call up a publicist and craft a rebuttal. Screenshots just sit there, quiet as a Sunday morning, and tell the truth while everybody else scrambles. Now, this is the part where a normal story would end. A woman drops receipts, the other side denies it, the internet chooses sides, and we all move on to the next bit of foolishness. But this isn't a normal story. Because Papoose broke his silence too. And Papoose did it in the last way anybody expected him to do it. Papoose did not go live. Papoose did not post a paragraph caption with a black background. Papoose did not send out a lawyer's statement. He sat inside his car, alone, and he spoke low, and he spoke slow, and honey, what came out of Papoose's mouth was the kind of thing that shifts an entire narrative in the space of about 90 seconds. Papoose admitted that he had stayed quiet for as long as he did because he was hoping, really hoping, that what he had started to see with his own eyes was not real. He owned his own mistakes. He did not try to paint himself as a saint. But then he said the sentence that flipped the whole board over. He said, in his own words, that he had started to feel less like a partner and more like a pawn inside a scheme he never signed up for. Not a husband. Not a boyfriend. A piece on a board he did not design. Baby. Do you understand what he just did? Do you understand? Papoose just confirmed, in his own trembling voice, sitting in his own car, the theory that I told you about in the last video. He confirmed that this whole thing, the interviews, the promotions, the timing, the branding of a shiny new love story, was not organic. He confirmed that somebody had been steering the ship. He confirmed that a man he trusted, a woman he cared about, a stage he thought he was performing on for love, had actually been a stage set up for a different purpose entirely. And when the accused party, the man himself, the person at the very center of the whole affair, comes out and quietly agrees with the woman who exposed him, that is not a he said she said anymore, sugar. That is a confession by both witnesses. The game is over the moment the players stop pretending they weren't playing. And here is where the fallout stopped being an online argument and started looking like something with real-world consequences. Because as the night rolled on, and as the clip started getting rehosted on every gossip page from here to Los Angeles, people started noticing things. Small things at first. Then bigger things. Fans started pointing out that certain brand relationships around Claressa Shields' name appeared, at least publicly, to be shifting in tone. Certain accounts were suddenly a lot slower to post. Certain announcements that had been teased on Claressa Shields' timeline appeared to quietly disappear. Whether every one of those observations turned out to be accurate or not is a question for another night, but the perception, honey, the perception was already doing its damage. And in the business of being a public figure, perception is currency. When the currency starts losing value, everything you built on top of that currency starts to wobble. Suddenly every silence from Claressa Shields' camp was being read like a paragraph. Every post was being analyzed like a legal document. Every appearance was being screenshotted, zoomed in on, and passed around like evidence. The conversation stopped being about the relationship at all. The conversation became about the possible collateral damage. About the sponsorships. About the endorsements. About whether the same corporate world that had rushed to put Claressa Shields' face on their campaigns was now going to quietly step back and let the storm pass. Whether those fears were founded or not, the shift in tone online was undeniable. When the noise around your name gets louder than your accomplishments, the headlines start writing themselves without your permission. And by that point, sugar, most of the internet had already decided that the actual battle was not happening in the comments section. The actual battle was happening in the court of public opinion, and Claressa Shields was, for the first time in a very long time, on the defensive without a corner to retreat to. Meanwhile, Papoose, honey, Papoose went ghost. That's the only way to describe it. His social media slowed to a crawl. Public appearances thinned out. The louder the internet got, the quieter Papoose became. And people noticed, oh, people noticed. Because the more Papoose disappeared, the more the internet filled that silence with theories. Some of them wild. Some of them sad. Some of them uncomfortably close to what he himself had admitted in that quiet clip from his parked car. And while he was fading into the background and Claressa Shields was drowning in questions she could not answer, Remy Ma, sugar, Remy Ma kept posting. Kept working. Kept moving with the easy rhythm of a woman who had already said her piece and had nothing further to prove. That contrast, baby, that contrast right there became the loudest part of the entire story. Two people trapped in a storm they helped create, and one woman walking through the same weather like she couldn't even feel the rain. You know what that told the audience without a single word being spoken? It told them everything. Sometimes, honey, you do not have to win the argument. Sometimes the way people react to your silence tells the whole story for you. She didn't need a follow-up video. She didn't need a press tour. She didn't need a comeback single dropped strategically for the news cycle. Remy Ma just kept living, and the audience watched the other side sink under the weight of their own choices. And every hour that passed, the case she had made grew a little more solid in the minds of the people who had once dismissed her as bitter. Because bitter women don't sit still. Bitter women don't post pictures of their kids and their meals and their little morning routines while the internet burns. Bitter women are still fighting. She looked like a woman who had already finished her fight and was calmly, quietly, unbotheredly living in the ceasefire. Now let's talk about the receipts one more time, because I know some of y'all in the comments are already typing, but Stella, none of that has been verified in a courtroom, none of that has been officially confirmed by anybody's team. And you are absolutely right, baby. In the strict legal sense, none of what was alleged last night has been tested in a court of law. Everything remains at the level of public claim, publicly circulated messages, and publicly aired audio. That is important, and I want to be crystal clear on that so nobody in this room walks away thinking we are treating rumor like a verdict. But here is what we can say without any hesitation at all. The court of public opinion moves faster than any judge, sweeter than any jury, and shows no mercy for people who spend years shaping a narrative that turns out to be built on sand. And that court has already started deliberating. Whether the traditional legal system ever weighs in or not, the reputation trial is happening in real time, and Claressa Shields is presently the defendant. And Papoose, sugar, he is not walking out of this clean either. Do not let the sad car monologue fool you. A man does not get to be the alleged center of a 2-decade marriage, then the alleged center of a very public affair, then the alleged victim of a whole plan he supposedly did not know he was inside of, without carrying some of that weight himself. He is a grown man. He made his choices. And even in his own confession, he did not deny the choices. He only tried to explain the framing around them. That's the part one want you to sit with. Because there is a version of this story where he is the naive one who got played by a rising superstar. And there is a version of this story where he is the calculating one who knew exactly which strings were being pulled and simply lost control of the narrative at the very end. Both versions are alive on the internet tonight, and he himself has not clearly told us which version to believe. That is not the behavior of an innocent man. That is not the behavior of a guilty man. That is the behavior of a man who is still figuring out which version he can survive. Now, before I let you go, I want to zoom out one more time. Because this is not just about three famous people arguing on the internet. This is not just about a hip-hop marriage that ended in messy screenshots. This is about a bigger pattern, honey, and if you have been rolling with tea with Stella long enough, you already know I love a bigger pattern. The bigger pattern is this. When a public figure builds their entire brand on being the underdog, the loyal one, the honest one, the one who worked harder than everybody else, that brand becomes a target the moment their private life starts to look nothing like the public story. Claressa Shields did not just spar with Remy Ma last night. Claressa Shields sparred with the version of Claressa Shields that Claressa Shields herself had spent years selling. And that fight is harder than any fight you will ever have in a ring, because there is no bell. There is no round. There is no referee. There is only the internet, and the internet has an infinite memory and zero patience for people it feels lied to. Papoose is learning the same lesson from a different angle. For years he cultivated the image of the ride-or-die husband, the man who stood by his wife through the hardest chapter of her life, the man whose loyalty was legendary. That image had value. That image opened doors. That image made people trust him in a way they did not have to trust him. And when that image cracks, honey, it cracks loud. It cracks in interviews. It cracks in comment sections. It cracks in the quiet places, in the DMs, in the group chats, in the whispered conversations that shape careers behind the scenes. He is not just losing an argument. He is losing the currency he had been quietly spending for 2 decades. That is the real cost of last night, and it is a cost that no amount of parked car apology videos can pay back all at once. And Remy Ma, oh, Remy Ma. She might have just pulled off one of the most surgical public relations counterstrikes we've seen from a hip-hop wife in a very long time. Because she didn't just win the news cycle. She reframed the entire 2-year story. Overnight. Without breaking a sweat. She turned the bitter ex label into the calm truth-teller label. She turned the messy divorce into the strategic exposure of a manufactured love story. She turned public sympathy into public respect. And she did it all by refusing to sound like the emotional woman the internet was daring her to be. That is not luck, baby. That is not chaos. That is preparation meeting opportunity, and she had clearly been preparing this move for a long, long time. Now let me leave you with a few honest questions, because Tea with Stella is a two-way conversation, always. First question. Do you believe Remy Ma's claim that Claressa Shields was quietly entertaining a whole other gentleman on the side, or does that sound to you like a very clean, very well-timed deflection designed to shift the entire narrative in Remy Ma's favor? Sit with that one before you type. Second question. Is Papoose the victim of a plan he did not design, the way he appears to be presenting himself, or is Papoose a full participant in the game who is now performing regret because the receipts finally caught up to him? Third question. Is Claressa Shields going to bounce back from this in the ring and in the market, or has the last 24 hours quietly redrawn the ceiling on what her career can become outside of boxing? And final question, the one I really want your honest answer on. If Remy Ma has been telling us the truth this entire time, in bits and pieces, in interviews we ignored,